Well, hello to you all. Thank you so much for joining me this evening for this discussion about race and racism and being a diverse church family, which is one of our core values at St. Peter's. It's great to have you with us, and I'm really grateful for you agreeing to have this conversation. I've asked you to have this chat with me for a couple of reasons. The first one is because I really want to learn from you about what it's like to belong to a white British majority church like St. Peter's, but a church that is also very diverse, and what that experience is like as someone from a different ethnicity. I'm really hoping that you'll be able to help me learn about that, and partly so that I can pastor and other pastors can pastor the church better, and so that we can all grow in this family that God has made us to be. I think that it's particularly important to have this conversation now, partly because, of course, this issue has received a lot of prominence recently, as you know, after the murder of George Floyd in America, and then protests that came here and spread around the country and different countries in the world. I also think it's important right now to have this conversation because our vision at St. Peter's is to be equipping God's family to keep serving, strengthening, and starting gospel churches. Family is right at the heart of that vision and is our particular focus this year. And this issue of racial diversity in unity in the gospel is right at the heart of that. So I'm really excited and grateful to you that we can have this conversation this evening. Perhaps we can start this way. Would you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, what you do, how long you've been at St. Peter's. Koge, why don't you start us off?
Hi, my name is Koge Ogedegbe, and I've been at St. Peter's Church since the summer of 2003. I work as a consultant surgeon in the local hospital, and I have a variety of responsibilities in the church. I have a wife and 2 children. The kids are now grown up, and both of them have flown the nest. So I currently attend St. Peter's with my wife, Kemi, and have a variety of responsibilities, one of which is being on the PCC.
Thanks, Kogi. Ola and Ayo, I'll come to you next.
Ayo, I've been at St. Peter's now for 4 years. I'm an accountant and married to Ola.
Hi, I'm Ola. I'm a gardener. We started coming to St. Peter's at February 2016.
Brilliant, thank you. And Santana?
Hi, I'm Santana Lewis. I have been at St. Peter's since around about July 2013. Started officially coming in September 2013. I'm a primary school teacher. I work 3 days a week, and I have 3 young children, twin boys, who are coming up to a year old, and a little girl, Christiana, who's 4 years old as well.
Fantastic, thank you all very much. Santana, I'm going to come to you first, if I may. Just tell me a little bit what you've been feeling over recent weeks in the light of the George Floyd murder and all the protests and media attention that has been focused on this issue of race. I'm guessing it must have been a strange time. Tell me a little bit about how you've experienced that.
Yeah, strange is a word for it. It's been quite challenging. I think I've seen family members fall out over the issues. I have a sister who is mixed race and is finding issues within her own family where she's experiencing or realizing that there are some quite racist attitudes held within her family. And I'm finding lots more family members speaking out, but also then finding people just the talking about lots of issues to do with race. It can be quite challenging, just because it brings up lots of things from, I think people think, oh, it's all about George Floyd's murder, but it's not. It brings up a lot about just experiences of racism in general, my own experiences of racism from people, just general public, but also thinking about my experiences with the police, even over here. I mean, I was stopped in my car for doing nothing wrong and questioned by the police, questioned if I had a criminal record. Apparently I looked lost. So it's bringing up those things. But for me, I think the biggest thing is having had my children and having 2 young black boys. That's been a real thing, and it was always a fear. There's always a bit of fear there, having 2 young black boys, of what the future's going to hold for them. And so it's just really highlighted those fears and those worries for the future for them. So yeah, it's been quite challenging emotionally, and just having those conversations with people, bringing those conversations up.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ola and Ayo, perhaps I'll come to you next if I may. We want to be thinking a little bit about this issue in the context of our church family. That's one thing that we have in common. Perhaps then you could tell me and explain a bit how it's been for you as a young Nigerian family moving to St. Peter's, those sort of 3 or 4 years ago, as you mentioned. What has helped you to feel really a part of the church family? What has got in the way of that, if anything has? What's been good and bad about your experience of settling into St. Peter's Church as a Nigerian family?
Generally, settling in St. Peter's has been great. It's been largely positive. And I think that was really because there was a concerted effort by the previous youth and families minister to introduce us not just into the church, but make us part of the church fabric. And I don't know if it was wider conversations with the pastoral team, I suspect it was, but he made a concerted effort not just to be friendly, but also to ask us to teach. So there is the Cypher group, the 14 to 18, and there are lots of young black girls and boys in that group. And he thought it was a need, or it would be a benefit to them to see an adult that looked like them in the church. And he wasn't strong-arming at all, but he was very insistent and very encouraging about bringing me into that group. And it's been wonderful. So that's been positive. I suppose on the other side has been slight reservation from general church family sometimes to just have a conversation. You know, when we're in the well at the end of church, it might be a case that a lot more effort, I feel, on my part as the newcomer into the church, would have been great to have a lot more conversation. Just say, hey, how are you? I see you're new. What's happening? Who are you? That I feel could have been done a lot better. But as I said, also on the other side, there was efforts on more the pastoral team, I would say, because, I mean, again, pick you out, Rob. Ollie did it. There were very few people on the pastoral and staff team who made that conscious effort. I think generally it could be shyness. It could be maybe the lack of familiarity with this group of people who tended to congregate together as a Nigerian group of friends in the middle of the well. And it was maybe hard to break into that conversation sometimes, but it would have been maybe good to do that on the part of the welcoming family, because we were effectively guests in the beginning. You know, we've had a great time. The children love the church because they felt part of a family. But I think those kinds of things would be good for any newcomers into the church, for kind of majority white members to be a lot more enveloping in kind of their welcome.
Thank you. That's really good to hear. Koge, I'll come to you if I may. As you said in your introduction, you've been at St. Peter's, 17 years now. How do you feel about, I suppose, the integration of different cultures and ethnicities into the church family over that longer time scale? How have you experienced that and seen others experience it through the years?
I think things are slightly different now compared to when I came in 2003. And two events really determined how I settled in as a person and perhaps as a family. One of them was David Banton, having seen me at church once, dropped by informally at my house in Haroldwood, and just said he's come to introduce himself and to welcome us formally to the area and to the church, which I found very, very touching and moving. And I felt that degree of pastoral care is not something that I've ever experienced before in all my Christian life. And then subsequently, Shirley and Larry Morris then invited us over to their house for a meal, just to sort of try and help us to break the ice, to help us get to know them and perhaps some other people. And those two events really set the tone for me in terms of integration. Subsequently, I was then invited again by Shirley to join the reading and the praying team, and then afterwards to get on the welcome rota. And she specifically said that, Koge, look, I think it'll be good for you to join the welcome rota so that people can see somebody like you and feel a lot more welcome in the church. And that I thought was a very, very important step in terms of trying to introduce some form of integration in the church. And you have to remember, at that time, 2003, 2005, there were no more than maybe 6 Nigerian families in the church. And it would have been very odd for us to all sort of click together and have conversations amongst ourselves. That did not really happen just because of the way that things were handled at the time. Things have changed since, and there are many more Black and ethnic minority families. Because there are many more, and you can see that quite a few of the minority groups tend to come together in various groups, and they feel comfortable in their own company, which is not a bad thing. But I fear that that sort of ethnic congregation hinders the larger multiracial integration, which is actually required. But the good news is that a lot of the young folk, and Ayo has just mentioned that they are quite involved in a variety of things in the church, which usually helps. What you don't often see is the integration across generations. If you get involved in church life and activity, you tend to meet more people. And as you meet more people, you understand them a lot better, and you begin to understand how you can actually get along with people better socially, because most of what we are talking about is not necessarily ethnicity. I think it's more cultural, the way we speak, the way we dress, the way we communicate, and all those things. So the more you associate with people, the better it is to understand them, and it helps so much more to try and ensure that we are a better integrated body.
Thanks, Koge. I really appreciate your insights. Thank you. Santana, I wanted to just come back to you, if I may. You mentioned your lovely children earlier on, bringing up Christiana and then the 2 little boys as well. Now, what do you, I suppose, hope that they will see and feel as they grow up in a church like St. Peter's, to help them understand that the gospel should make us united across our differences? What are your hopes for your children in a church like ours?
I think the most important thing for me is that church feels like home, that it feels like family. And I think we're really blessed at St. Peter's with that. I mean, Christiana already, she talks about church family and God's family. This period of being in lockdown, all she wants to do is go back to church. She wants to just be with her friends. And I think that that's really, really important, is that she sees that, yeah, family, it's everybody there is church family. And thankfully, I think I'm really grateful for that. I think it's important that they see church as different from the world which quite frankly is probably going to treat things at the moment will treat them differently, harshly in some cases, somewhere where they don't feel that, that they don't feel like they're going to be singled out or treated differently because of the color of their skin, or somewhere where they have family, that they see that people come together. I think that's one thing. I said this whole George Floyd, all of this seems to be a period where we're seeing people break apart, families break apart, different cultures, different races break apart. It's the them and us feeling out in the world, and I think that church shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't feel like them and us. And sometimes, as I think has been pointed out by the others, it can feel a bit. There's little groups, and me not being of the Nigerian background, I'm actually Afro-Caribbean, I'm Jamaican heritage. Actually, I don't even fit into those groups, and sometimes you can see those groups, and I think actually it should be a place where we see people coming together, not segregating themselves off into little groups. So I think that's hard to do. I think it involves a lot of deeper conversations with people getting to know each other. And I want them to feel like they're known and seen, and that they're just loved and appreciated at church as part of a family.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those things, all of you. We've touched in this conversation on certain things that have been helpful at St. Peter's and certain things that have been less helpful. I would love us to think together about how we can get better at being a diverse family. I'm sure you guys can probably help me with that. We've touched on a couple of things that you might want to say more about. The point about, I suppose, the visibility of Black and ethnic minority people in leadership or at the front of church. We've talked a number of times about after the service, people gathering with people who look like them, rather than perhaps in a more visibly and obviously mixed groups of friends or people who are talking together. You might want to say more about any of those things. You might want to say some other stuff too. What do you think would help St. Peter's to grow as a true family across its diversity, so that it can say to the world, the gospel has done this. There's nowhere else like this in this area. The gospel has brought together people from all sorts of walks of life and different ethnicities as well to be a family. What would help us do that better?
One, the way that praise and worship takes place. And that is a very, I don't think it's ethnic, I think it's more cultural. And a lot more, I think, speaking for Black people, Nigerian and Black people generally, are people who tend to, they're very touchy, they're very expressive with words and with the and with a lot of body language. And at least 3 people felt that if our worship service was a bit longer and a bit more interactive, that would make some difference in trying to make them feel that they belong. Because if you look through the background of majority, I can speak for the Nigerian ethnic minority group who come to St. Peter's, most of them have a sort of Pentecostal background. And the way worship takes place in a Pentecostal church is slightly different and a bit more involved. And it's that is one of the things I think that people do miss. And the other is when a sermon is being preached. I spoke to my kids who are younger and I spoke to older people. They just felt that the way a sermon is preached in St. Peter's is nearly academic, When David Banton was vicar, well, that was a style. But he had this great vision and great blessing of his pastoral care was wonderful. And I've not encountered that before. Now, Rob, you've come along, and when you preach, you try to make the preaching relevant for today. And a lot of people have said, well, that's a huge advantage. Now they are beginning to understand and feel a bit more involved in the church. And so those are the 2 areas that a variety of the people I've spoken to felt that praise and worship doesn't quite, and the word is that it doesn't get them in the mood. Now, I don't know how you're going to interpret that. And then the preaching, making it a lot more contemporary.
Kogi, thank you. It's really important for me and I guess all of us to hear these things. I'm very grateful to you for raising both of those. Any other thoughts from others of you? What would help us to be reunited as a diverse family?
Again, it goes to relationship building. I think Kogi raised a couple of examples with Shirley and Larry, and kind of building relationships outside of the church building, and really maybe a lot more of older, more established members doing that, maybe adoption of a new family. I mean, some of us who have been there now for a few years are quite embedded, but I think it could be daunting, or there could be the temptation to stick to your familiar groups if there is no conscious effort on the part of kind of older members to take somebody on, as Shirley seemed to do, as Ollie did, as David did with us specifically. That I think would be helpful, particularly when people have younger families. Now I see the way Christiana goes around, and she's really adopted by everyone in church. That kind of thing is not just for Christiana's age. She's blessed, she's happy, she runs to everyone. But I feel like that can be spread more widely to adults, because yes, I'm an adult, I should navigate the world, but it's daunting coming into a new church. If you're coming from a very different environment, Pentecostal, like most of us are, it can be a bit daunting to feel like you have come somewhere and then still feel apart from the whole. That I think is key, kind of taking people on, not as a project, but really as a family member, as a brother who has been, who you haven't seen for a while, maybe just a little loving care.
Thank you. Santana, you were going to say something as well, perhaps?
Yeah, I was going to say, so I was lucky. My first experience of St. Peter's was a watch night service. And I think most people are aware the watch night service is predominantly Black people at the watch night service. I don't know, but inviting some people along to the watch night service, I think sometimes there's a bit of fear. I think things like that need more integration, that it's not just a group of, but that it's St. Peter's family welcoming the new year in together. I think from what I've seen, it's that kind of fear, it's going to be too charismatic, it's going to be, someone actually expressed to me, it's going to be too Black, and I'm like, well, what do you mean? And it's that drawing that out, it's going to be a bit more, it's going to be longer, it's going to be more charismatic or more Pentecostal in nature. I think you touched on it, on building those relationships that people really understand, rather than they just take it on the superficial surface of, this is what we know about Black people, they're loud and musical and they eat spicy food, that sort of thing. I think building those relationships and seeing actual events and things where people do come together, that they're not just groups for certain groups, that they're for everybody as a family, is really important.
Thank you. I'm really grateful for all that you've said. I know we've not had very long. Is there anything that you haven't had a chance to say so far that you'd like to?
I would just like to say, though, that when we talk about integration, it often goes both ways. There is a local family, and there is a sort of a new family coming in. And whilst the host family should do all they can to try and adopt, as Ayo has suggested, the new family, the new family coming in would also have to, in some ways, adopt some of the social norms of the environment where they find themselves in, to make that integration a lot easier. For those of us, I came to the United Kingdom maybe nearly 30 years ago. And one would have to expect that over that time, I have made some other friends who are really not like me, because it's only when you can understand people socially that you can begin to integrate. Without social understanding, integration is very, very, very difficult. And I think both sides, both both the non-ethnic minority and the ethnic minority groups have to try and build that social rapport to get us going and to be better integrated.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think, yeah, sorry. I think it's also, so I've had a couple of experiences where you've got a new family that joins that might be Black, or they've identified that they're Jamaican, and automatically it's Santana's Jamaican, you want to speak to her. Well, actually, so I was born in London, born in South London, have lived in England all my life, have been to Jamaica once in my entire life. And so actually not assuming that just because someone's Jamaican that we're going to have lots in common, but actually just because we're brothers and sisters in Christ, that we would have something to talk about, especially if, so I go to 9:15 service, especially, have you spoken to so-and-so who's Jamaican who goes to the 11 o'clock service? Well, no, because we've never actually crossed paths. It's those sorts of things of, it's just not just because I'm Jamaican, I'm going to speak to the Jamaican. Actually, we should be talking to each other as people from or different cultures.
I had an experience with myself trying to pick up my children with one of the holiday or after session they had, and I remember I think they thought I was somebody's else totally. So, and they released all the very so-called confidential information without realizing I am Tammy and Joseph, that I'm totally different from that person. Knowing that I've joined the church since February 2016. But I think in those areas, I will put it down as training and for, I know we have a lot of volunteers, a lot of, advocate ministers, what term you use. But I think when it comes to the sensitive nature of the families we're dealing with and the sort of, help we're rendering to children, we need to be more aware about people's needs and culture. So I'll just leave it as that.
Yeah. I agree. And can I suggest that we encourage people, because this is what I'll try to do, to encourage everyone who comes to church. Every Sunday you come to church, try and speak to somebody different that you've never spoken to. It doesn't matter what their color is. Just speak to them. And one of the things I really admire, I keep going back to David Banton. I've never met somebody who knows everybody's name, 400 people. How do you do that? And the only way it's possible is investing the time in speaking to the people. And if each of us, Black, white, Asian, or whatever, speak to somebody different every Sunday in the world, you'll be amazed at how quickly we'll be integrated as one family.
Thank you. I'm really grateful to you all. You've said some hard things, some encouraging things. Everything that, as I've heard, has felt relevant, and I want to reflect on it a little bit more. And perhaps we can do that together or with others again another time. I'm grateful. I realize that it's not easy perhaps to talk about some of these things. And so thank you for being willing to, for the sake of the Lord and for the sake of your church family. I'm grateful, and I'm sure they will be too. We'll draw things to a close here. So thank you so much for being with us this evening. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.